Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Declined series. So in this series we're following this very nice opening from White's and from Black's perspective, and today we're continuing with our Queen's Gambit Declined studies and a so-called Albin Countergambit. The Albin Countergambit that we have started recently, we have seen first this most popular trap that is possible in the Albin Countergambit, the so-called Lasker trap, and then we have started a series with some common mistakes that Black is making in the opening stage, and today we're turning the board a little bit. Today we're seeing the common mistakes that are made by White in the Albin Countergambit. So we'll see now really the most common and most aggressive methods that are possible from Black's perspective. And there is many times a huge problem for White. White doesn't know where to go with the dark square bishop, and especially also we have seen in the Lasker trap, if you have followed so far our Albin Countergambit series, that also in the Lasker trap with the move e3 White has problems to develop the dark square bishop. So that's why our team, our subject of the Albin Countergambit will be now the weakness of the dark square bishop. And you see now how many mistakes really are made by White, and they are common mistakes. These are mistakes that are played in grandmaster level, international master level, FIDE master level. So all of these mistakes are really played in a decent level of chess, and I think you face them many times. And if you face them, of course, from Black perspective, you want to punish these weaknesses, you want to punish these inaccuracies in the opening, and of course destroy your opponent in an early stage of the game. So let's see now again some new ideas here for Black, and again some new really problems in Black, in White's development. So here we have of course d4, d5 and c4. So far the Queen's Gambit Declined, and here we have with the move e5 the Albin Countergambit. So here after d takes e5, which will be the normal response here of White, we have now the move d4. And again I'm pointing out the idea about this move d4, and why we play this gambit is to push this pawn further and then support it with knight to c6 if necessary, even with bishop to c5 and some ideas of a5 to maybe create sort of a blockade on the queen side, but just support this pawn on d4, which is very annoying to handle. It of course controls this very annoying e3 square. White would love of course to play the move e3, but we have seen in the Lasker trap that e3 is not possible, so that's why many times White is forced to play g3 and then bishop to g2 to develop here the light square bishop in this way. Also many times in the in the Albin Countergambit you'll see a double fianchetto by White with g3 bishop to g2, then also with b3 bishop to b2. So this is a good way then for White to make progress here, and of course to develop at least somehow the bishop pair. But here after move knight to f3, which will be a normal response also by White, knight to c6, we have many times this mistake by White, the move bishop to f4, and it seems so that it's a decent idea. We're supporting our e5 pawn, so basically White wants to do the same because White is also a annoying pawn to handle. White can also rely maybe on the space advantage, but the problem here in this scenario is that the bishop on f4 becomes actually an object of Black's attack. Now Black needs simply to develop the minor pieces in a good way. Black plays basically the common idea of the Albin Countergambit. We'll play knight to e7, knight to g6, and then we'll try to recapture the pawn on e5. So here knight from b to d2 can be played, and now of course knight to g6 attacking the bishop, and there is now only there are only two squares now for the bishop. You can play bishop to g5 or bishop to g3, and you see now both of these moves are really huge positional problem. Even if you try bishop to g5, Black can simply play normal move. Black doesn't have to complicate things, just play bishop to e7. After bishop takes e7, queen to e7, and now White maybe can develop the light square bishop here on g2, but now we should simply take, and you see now White's progress is simply too slow here because we have also this stunning tactic with the move knight to d3. Okay, we're not gaining immediately some material, but I think it's a good choice here to play this line because White cannot castle anymore. White will have to play the king on f1 and will have problems again in the development. So you see now this idea, in my opinion, is not working here for Black. For White to just attack here on g5. So that's why White has to play many times the move move bishop to g3. But notice now, when white is playing this move on the move bishop to g3, you cannot play g3 anymore, and then you cannot develop the light square bishop in a good way, maybe to this square, because again you have to play e3 just in order to get your bishop out. But now black can play this beautiful positional move bishop to c5, and you see now the problem is now e3 is not working, and we have now a good control. You can maybe try here a3 in order to maybe kick away the bishop here with the move b4, but black can make progress here, can play sort of a blockade, because of course b4 is not working now. So maybe here you could try queen to c2, or you can even try, I don't know, maybe something like knight to b3, but I don't think that it's still a problem here for black, because with queen to e7, okay, you can maybe take, or even if you take here the bishop on c5, we just take, and then after a couple more moves we will probably take out here the pawn on e5. So in my opinion, not a problem here for black. So here in one game that I found, and it's a grandmaster level game, it was the Leho Laurin against Boris Kostic. Boris Kostic played here with the black pieces. I wanted to show you how he exploited now these weaknesses in white's position. Again, I'm pointing out the bishop is not out. Maybe here black could get challenged by queenside castling by white, but this is not a problem. I think even if white castles queenside, there are so many weaknesses in white's position, especially in light squares. A2 is weak, b3 is weak, c4, a4 is weak, c4 pawn is weak. With bishop to e6, this pawn can be attacked. So as I said, really weird position here for white. After move queen to c2, we have queen to e7. This is now the normal idea. We want to simply grab the pawn back. We have queen to e4. Now a4, never even allow here to play the move knight to b3. And you see now with the move h4, white try to expand here somehow on the king side, but it's not possible, because of course black played a beautiful blockade with the move h5. And now comes the must move, sort of, because we cannot tolerate the position like this. The bishop is stuck here. That's why white here tried e3, but it's a desperate move. D takes e3, f takes e3. Look at these weaknesses now. Pawn on e5 weak, pawn on e3 weak, and again I'm pointing out many light square weaknesses here in white's position. So really dominant game here for black. So in the continuation of this game that I found, as I said in the database, bishop to b6 was played. We have bishop to d3, rook to a5. You see also many times, we will come to the part when we'll analyze also some rook lift ideas in the Albin Countergambit from black's perspective. But notice now the e5 is really not protectable anymore. We have here kingside castling, knight to e5, and this particular game white even tried to move b4, a takes b3 en passant, knight to b3, and now with the move f5. The cool part about this game is that the queen got trapped. Really wild stuff here by black. So the queen got trapped in this position. White resigns. So as I said, the point about this game is, in my opinion, that this idea bishop to f4 is simply not working. We'll get our point knight to e7, knight to g6. We will get an extra tempo, and we have seen, even if we get challenged with the move bishop to g5, bishop to e7 is a perfect idea. Then we will get our goal queen to e7, and we will capture the pawn here on e5 and still continue the game with our beautiful d4 pawn. So as I said, not a good continuation here for white. So I wanted to show you also how developing the dark square bishop, especially on the king side, is actually never possible, I think, for white. And even if white tries it many times, so white could face many positional problems. So white should not develop the dark square bishop here on the king side. White should try ideas maybe of a3, b4, but white has to develop the dark square bishop here on this diagonal. Maybe then afterward g3, bishop to g2. Will probably play a double fianchetto style. Well, of course the bishops will be very dangerous. But I wanted to again show you a common mistake that white is making if white is still trying to get the bishop on the king side. So here in continuation, you could try maybe here g3 from white's perspective, bishop to g4, bishop to g2. So far perfect position here by white. Queen to d7, and now knight to d2. Still a good move. Now white can make progress with a3, b4, and similar stuff. Bishop to b2. So here queenside castling was played. We have a3, and now a normal idea, knight to e7, knight to g6, and then with the idea to attack the pawn on e5. So we have here b4, still a good position here for white. So white didn't make mistakes so far, but now after move knight to g6, what I've seen many times, and believe me, I've been there, I've made many times the same mistake myself from white's perspective. I played many times also some ideas of knight to e4, maybe not in the same position, but I really wanted to continue my pressure here around the square d4, maybe also to play something like bishop to b2, but this is not possible because black will simply recapture the pawn on e5. And now after knight to e5, notice that the c4 is now a huge problem, and there is also a threat of d3 is a huge problem in white's position. So from this point on, again, black is much better. And you see many times this idea to play knight to e4, because again, white tries maybe here to develop the dark square bishop on the king side, and that's exactly what white should never do in the Albin Countergambit from white's perspective, maybe as an exception, but not as a rule here. Bishop to g5, bishop to f4 are still not working. Even if you try bishop to f4, this bishop will be recaptured, and maybe you can fix your pawn structure here with g takes f4, but then you face again some likes for weaknesses. Black can simply proceed, as I said, even if you try here in this particular scenario after knight to e5, even if you try, I don't know, bishop to f4 will simply take it out. So there is not a good way here for black to pardon me, for white to make progress. So this is not a way to develop the dark square bishop. Many times, as I said, white is making the same mistake over and over again, but in the Albin Countergambit it's not possible. So I wanted to show you again why this is not possible, why white should never, but really never, play with the dark square bishop on this side of the board. Here again, the Albin Countergambit, and so far again, white played a beautiful game. White also counterattacked the beautiful pawn on d4. We have now bishop to g4, and now white took knight takes d4. We have bishop to c5, an attack against the knight, and again white tried this idea, bishop to g5. Again, white made a mistake, and here black took the bishop immediately. Bishop takes g5, and it was game over because it was a dirty trap here by black. We have now knight to c6. Of course, if you take here the queen on g5, then of course you get bishop to b4, first a check. You have to cover yourself with the queen. Bishop takes d2, comes again with the check, king to d2, and now knight to d4 loses a piece. Black is continuing the game with up a whole piece, so it's a completely winning endgame then for black. So this is really wild. So as I said, this idea bishop to g5 again, but again it's not working. Be careful of what you're doing from white's perspective. Queen to g5. In this particular game that I found in the database, knight to c6 was played. Black got challenged in this way. White realized the tactical problems with the move bishop to b4, but not the problem. Bishop to c6 was played. We have pardon me, bishop takes f3, g takes f3, and now after b takes c6, here in this position, finally white resigned. Again, a same position where black is simply up a whole piece. This is not possible. Bishop to g5 was the crucial and main mistake. So let's see now another example. Again, we'll see some problems of the development of the bishops. Here again, g3. This is now the fianchetto variation. We have bishop to e6. Here after move knight to d2, we have queen to d7, bishop to g2, and now queenside castling. So you will face many times, I think, this position from white's perspective. Black is now trying to launch this attack, h5, h4, and similar stuff. Is trying to then trade off the light square bishops and try to deliver checkmate with the rook and the queen on the h file. This is now a normal idea in the Albin Countergambit. You should be careful, but this is not an idea I think that you should bother you, especially when you, as we said, try some ideas of a3, b3, maybe bishop to b2. You have to develop the dark square bishop. Again, I'm pointing out many problems you will face with the dark square bishop from white's perspective. Queenside castling here was after queenside castling, kingside castling was played by white. We have here now this idea h5, now h4, perfectly fine to create a blockade, never allow here black to make progress, because if you play now maybe a slightly passive move, I think even this idea is working with h4 after knight to h4, rook takes h4, or maybe here a g5, and then some ideas of bishop to to h3 are possible to finally liberate now the h file to create really some madness. But I think even a rook sacrifice would be perfectly fine. Rook takes h4, g takes h4, and now again bishop to h3. Some ideas of knight to h6, knight to f5, maybe this maneuvers bishop to e7. So I think black has a dominant game. Also to take out simply this pawn on e5 is working, so you can choose whatever you like. But now I think white's position is falling apart. So that's why many times white is playing this idea. h4 is blocking the further progress on h5 by black. We have here a good square now for the knight, knight to h6, and the knight can be maneuvered here on g4. And now white, okay, plays the normal idea b3 with ideas of bishop to b2, but again with knight to g4 we can create really weird position here for white, because also then finally the e5 is again white makes a mistake, doesn't take care of the dark square bishop. We have said the dark square bishop is a huge problem. Now it's an indirect problem because we don't have now the connection between this rook and the queen, and it becomes a huge problem because black played a beautiful stunning tactic, played now knight to e3. Here I found the game, it was in an international master level, so it says Lucas Hoffman against Mikhail Kopilov. Mikhail Kopilov played here this beautiful tactical shot, knight to e3 after f takes e3. Look at this activity on the d file. Basically the game is over here for white. So here in the continuation we had the knight to e6, f takes e6, bishop to b2, and now black simply recaptured the piece, but has now this very annoying pawn on the d file, which is supported by the rook and the queen. This is now such an annoying pawn, and okay, in the near future we can of course include also the bishop into the game, so black is winning the game tactically for sure. We had rook to f3, knight to d4, rook to f1, escaping, and now after move knight to f5 in this position even white resigned. White realized these problems around the square g3, especially around the square e3 that are possible, bishop to c5, so it's really a position that you should resign here. So really stunning tactics. The d file is also many times a tactical problem, but that was only possible because again white didn't realize the tactical problems about the dark square bishop. Bishop to b2 would be perfectly fine, and maybe a white can survive now these positions. Okay, let's see now a different example. Again we have this fianchetto variation of the Albin Countergambit with the move g3. We have now knight from g to e7, knight to g6. We have bishop to g5. Again white is trying to develop the dark square bishop somewhere, is trying to get an activity because on this side maybe white is counting it would not be maybe a good piece. But here again with queen to d7 we can even escape from this attack. We don't have to even trade off the bishop pair now anymore, because we can still proceed with our normal idea, bishop to c5 and then a5, a4 and similar stuff. We can rely simply on our pawn activity here on the d file, so our d4 pawn is again our main strength. So here white could maybe try e6 to give up the pawn, at least provoking some weaknesses, but this is not a problem. Even if I don't know, maybe white castle kingside now, again I'm pointing out white is getting challenged many times again with the same idea. White will lose another tempo with the bishop. You have to again retreat to, with the bishop to c1. Now we can take knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and I think again black is perfectly fine here. You could maybe try b3, but now again with a5 and bishop to c5, again we had beautiful pawns here on d4. Maybe then afterwards also knight to c6 is possible. So again a good game here for black. So as I said, after move queen to d7 it was the gameplay by Ivan Razum against Ivan Kostov. Here queen to d7 was played because as I said in the near future this bishop will be kicked away for sure with the move h6. So we have here e6. Black got challenged with this move e6. Of course it's possible because what white is trying to do is at least to provoke some weaknesses, but now after f takes e6 and here kingside castling, now e5 was played, and again black has fixed now the d4 pawn, which is the main strength in black's position. With the move e5, with this support of both of these knights, white is strategically worse here. So we have to say this dominant now pawn center that black built here is causing now many positional problems. So we have here queen to c2, bishop queen to f7 with the ideas to play bishop to f5. We have a3, h6. Again I'm pointing out again the bishop loses another tempo, bishop to c1, bishop to f5. We have queen to a4, and now after queen to d7 knight to d2 was played, but now with bishop to e7 and knight to e1, here after a couple more moves, white lost the game. Again, I'm pointing out now we have again the same strategical goal: h5, h4, h takes g3, bishop to h3, trying to trade off the light square bishops, include the queen into the attack, build a rook and queen battery on the h file, and deliver checkmate. Again, I'm pointing out that the move bishop to g5 causes many problems. You played once with the bishop, you will probably have to play again with the bishop, because the bishop becomes an object of the attack. So as I said, it's something that white should try to avoid. So let's see now a different example. Here I wanted to show you again, after move bishop to g4, knight to d2, what after queen to e7 white tried is a move queen to a4, delayed now the bishop's activity, delayed the development here on the king side. We have queen side castling, and now b4. But again, very beautiful move, knight to e5, because again, I'm pointing out g3, bishop to g2, and bishop to b2 are necessary moves. At least in the beginning, you have to develop the pieces like this, because if you don't do that, look at this activity on the e file by the queen. There are even some tactical shots of knight to d3 that are possible. For instance, even if you try something like queen to h7, then you get knight to d3. Here, if you try king to d1, then you get the fork on f2. You will probably get one check, but it's not a problem. We can still escape, and it's not something that should bother here black in the continuation of the game. So this is not good. As I said, this early flank attack, it is okay. It is seems like a dangerous idea, but as we said, after move knight to e5, we had knight to e5, and now for queen to e5, now the threat is even move d3 with the discovered attack also against this rook on a1. So that's why bishop to b2, but now after king to b8, I think black has taken over here. White didn't gain anything. Now the supported pawn is very, very annoying. Here in the continuation, we had queenside castling by white, but it's not a problem. Here we can develop also the dark bishop in this way. We can play bishop to g7, bishop to h6. It's also perfectly fine, creating a pin. But again, our main strength remains, which is now the annoying pawn on d4. So we have here knight to f3, bishop to f3, g takes f3, now bishop to h6. In this particular game that I found also in the database, we have f4, queen to f4 in this position after white resigned. There's simply not too much pressure. You will lose the f2 pawn, and it was a bad game here for white. So as I said, this is something that white should also not do. Here I think we can witness the lack of development of the light square bishop, because this is something that you should not do. Queenside castling, very, very risky choice. The main strength again remains, in my opinion, this b4 attack immediately without developing the minor pieces, without securing the king by castling, is also a common mistake that white is making. So I wanted to show you also a nice method that white can try many times, but actually again it's a mistake. Again, white should try to avoid it, because after move e5 and the normal Albin Countergambit position that we can reach, white can play many times after move d4, a very interesting idea, e4. Now of course you see d takes e3 is not working, because again we reach a similar position like in the last card trap, queen to d8, king takes d8, and now after bishop to e3, white has a dominant position because white is simply up a whole pawn. But after move e4, this is not something that white should do, because we can play normal development with move knight to c6, and we are of course attacking now the pawn on e5. If knight to f3 happens, then bishop to g4 is perfectly fine, or our normal idea, knight to e7, knight to g6 again, with the idea to recapture the pawn on e5. So that's why many times white is playing an annoying move f4, but this move should not bother you, because it's actually a huge mistake. Again, notice that we have here a d4 pawn, and it's controlling the e3 square, so it's controlling really the dark squares in white's position. Now it should make really progress. We should break now the small pawn chain that white has built here with the move f6, and there are not many things that white could do. Maybe you could try here knight to f3 in order maybe to develop and control further the e5, but now we should simply take f takes e5, and now white can make also a strategical mistake with the move f5. This is something that white should not do, because we have a stunning tactic, bishop to f5. So now after e takes f5, we could make progress with move e4, and you see now this this whole position is getting pushed away for white. White is getting destroyed with this beautiful space advantage by black. Here you can maybe try knight to d2, but now with knight to f6 we're playing normal development. Maybe you can try bishop to e2, but look at this, queen to d6, maybe kingside castling, but now queenside castling. And I would not love to play now this game from white's perspective. These two pawns are simply so annoying to handle. There are even some traps, like even if you try something like b3, look at this, d3, where you're going to go with the bishop, and now with queen to d4 also the rook could be hanging. So basically you cannot develop any piece here on the queen side. The whole queen side is paralyzed here in white camp. So this is something that white should not do. After move f4 and f6, white has to play e takes f6. After move knight to f6 again, e5 is not so good, because now we get this one, bishop to b4. Even if you cover yourself with the bishop, then we have knight to g4, and even if you take bishop to b4, knight takes b4, okay, you could have maybe your fun by playing one check, but again knight to c6 is now an opportunity, and there is not a good way anymore to protect your e3 weakness. Knight to e3 is going to happen for sure, and again black is winning the game strategically for sure. So the evaluation is almost +3 here for black. Really wild stuff. The position is so bad for white that actually white can resign immediately. So here in the continuation, after move knight to f6, what could be possible is of course bishop to d3, but again we're playing this idea, bishop to d4. We are basically waiting the white to play bishop to d2, but now with knight to g4, knight to e3, this square can be taken. The e3 is a huge positional problem for white. Again, I'm pointing out the dark square problems, and also the problem of the dark square bishop is again present here. After move bishop to b4, bishop to d2, kingside castling, knight to e2 was played also in one game that I found in the database, but now again knight to g4 wins the game tactically. Knight to e3 is now happening for sure. So here the continuation, even queen to h4 was played, so here kingside castling is not good. There is even the checkmate threat on h2, so that's why h3, bishop takes d2, but now after queen to d2, now the knight comes in a good fashion here on the square e3, and again white is facing many strategical problems. So we have here rook to f3, a knight to e5. This is really beautiful move, because after f takes e5, rook to f3, g takes f3, and now here you get checkmated with queen to g5. So then you cannot escape from this attack. This knight is too powerful. The bishop will be included into the game, maybe also the rook can be included into the game. So it's again a tactical loss game for white. So here in the continuation, after move rook to f3 and the knight to e5, we had rook to g3, but now rook to f4, really stunning tactic. After move knight to a3 was played. Even if you try of course knight to f4, then you lose the rook on g3, so nothing dramatically changed. Again black is winning the game. So after move rook to f4, we have knight to a3, but now bishop to h3. Everything is really wild here. Even if you move the rook, then you get an annoying check on f2. So here in this position white resigned. So really stunning tactics that are possible. Again, I'm pointing out this idea is not working to play the move e4, because we can simply attack it. Black is attacking the pawn on e5 immediately. Now with the move f6, we're breaking this pawn chain that white has built here, this annoying stuff. And now after move e takes f6, knight to f6, notice that after bishop to b4, knight to g4, knight to e3 is, in my opinion, a good strategical place here for the knight. The knight will be outposted, and white is facing many times, as I said, some huge position problems. So okay, I think we have solved now the common mistakes by white and black that are possible. We are continuing now the Albin Countergambit with some normal ideas like the fianchetto variation and some classical stuff of this opening. We'll see also some good games from white's perspective. We'll see also some immortal games from black's perspective. We'll cover also of course some top engine games in this opening, so it will be, I think, a very fun continuation of this very nice gambit. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the study. If you want to see more about the Albin Countergambit, please check out my series. First we have seen, as I said, the Lasker trap, and then also the common mistakes that by black that are possible. So this is now our third video of the Albin Countergambit. Here's the link to the series, and if you want to see our whole Queen's Gambit Declined series, please check out our also the Queen's Gambit Declined series link here, where we have covered more than 50 videos about some other variations on the other defenses after first moves d4, d5, and c4. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.